episode of Papa Bear Hikes. All right, I'm going to welcome back our good friend Doob again. Welcome back.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
You recently took a trip to Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Could you tell us where exactly in Puerto Rico you went?
Yeah, so I was all over. I flew into San Juan, as most people do, from New York, and didn't stay in San Juan long. I think the first night we went to Luquillo, which is maybe an hour and a half, 2 hour drive from San Juan. We also went to Ponce, and all around really, but mostly like the jungles and the mountains. Stayed at a really cool lake spot out near Ponce too. But crazy switchback roads, like really, really wild driving, even for someone who's into wilder driving.
Well, the obvious question I'm going to ask you is, did you get a chance to do any hiking while you were in Puerto Rico?
I sure did. But man, is it way different than anything we do in the northeast of the US or the continental US. That's one of the reasons I really like visiting Puerto Rico too, is you're still within the United States. So it has like that, you kind of know what you're going to get. You know, like there's not like someone that's going to like pull you over like a federale in Mexico and shake you down. You know, like it's definitely a lot more like the United States. Um, I
Did you find any language barrier at all while you were down there, or were they?
Most people speak English to some degree, but also, I speak some Spanish. I think having some Spanish is good to have, but you're gonna eventually find somebody who speaks English. It's just not everywhere that everybody speaks that all the time. Um, about the hiking, though, sorry, I got on a tangent there, but
Okay, it was good
the
information.
the the gradient change is way different. Like these sorts of like tropical island mountains. Like I don't know what geological forces form them. I don't know if there's a volcano near there, but it's just so steep, and it's like the jungle is so dense. Like the underbrush in the northeast, is like it can be pretty thick. But I think about people who first arrived in Puerto Rico and places like that, and think, how did anyone walk into the island? It's like a wall. It's
Did you
just
did
mind
you get to
blowing.
experience any interesting wildlife encounters, or see anything you
Yeah.
don't get to see in the Northeast?
What's interesting is at night, the coqui frogs. It's like their national frog, and it's their national noise. Or like people think it's very intrinsic. This sound of this frog at night, it's deafening. It like they are in synchrony, but there's so many of them everywhere. This tree frog. So that was really cool. I saw some snakes. Um, I think the thing that's really incredible about there, because so much of what we see there has been introduced from outside, but just all the food that grows, like breadfruit is something I've never eaten before, but had, very like potato starchy kind of thing. Bananas grow everywhere. I learned that bananas produce bananas once, and then that banana tree doesn't produce bananas anymore. It keeps growing, but um, yeah, it's just really cool to be in a place where food grows, though. Like citrus is there, like mangoes and limes and things like that. It's just
So it's got to
really
be fun to go
amazing.
somewhere so different, right? So you're experiencing something totally different. Because
Yeah, I
you
think to the
grew up
people
in
who
the
are
North.
there, probably they're tired of it. But to me, to be in a place where just food is growing everywhere is mind blowing.
Right, we think of foraging for food here in the Northeast. You might be able to find some edible plants and maybe some edible nuts. And if you really know your mushrooms, and you better know them really well, maybe you can eat some
For
mushrooms.
sure. And that's the funny thing too, is I was looking on a lot of our hikes for mushrooms, and I saw them. Another thing that I thought was interesting is just that like snails look way different. They're snails like our snails in the Northeast growing up, like they have like a sort of squat shell. These are like really large and circular. Um, but yeah, also obviously there's tons of insects, and I got bit by a spider in one of my Airbnbs. Some of the places you sleep, you need to have a mosquito net, so it's different. It's also really different getting, I didn't do any true camping. I did hiking and staying on some farms that were pretty rustic. Um, but the power grid is really tough there, and Wi-Fi is also tough. Even in places that say they have Wi-Fi, you're not necessarily uh, going to have really great coverage. But I think
Would you
that's the
say
same here
they're
in the
still recovering
US.
from The hurricane that hit them a couple of years ago.
Man, it's really tragic to see out there. And the sort of like waves of devastation, be it earthquakes and then hurricanes, and then really poor responses to those events. The people are super resilient, but there's a ton of places where you're just like, it's kind of like going to New Orleans after Katrina years later. Like, what's going on here? So yeah, they're definitely feeling it. And from what I've heard from locals, they're seeing a lot of population either leave Puerto Rico for the mainland or, um, move towards the cities.
How did they seem to feel? Or maybe you didn't pick up on anything. Was there? Did you get any sense of how they felt towards mainlander U.S. citizens?
So it's really interesting. I mean, so my birthday is on the 4th of November, and election day was November 3rd. So I thought I was going there at a really great time because the national election, Puerto Rico doesn't vote in presidential elections. So I thought, well, maybe things will be like a little quieter. There was actually this huge measure on the ballot down there, though, about becoming a state or not. Um, and people were really animated and really about it. I didn't hear a consensus one way or the other. I think the votes speak to a pretty close, tie between people wanting to stay in or to become a state or just stay as they currently are in relation to the United States. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of consciousness of that, and it was a very like timely. I wondered, like, just like you asked, how do people feel about being in the United States, or do they want to be a state? But the election had a referendum just about that.
How would you? What would you say about the way you were treated? Because you're obviously from the mainland United States. Did you feel you were welcomed, or
Yeah, so it's funny. My partner speaks Spanish, and so a lot of times I think and she doesn't dress like in a particularly like New York way. I feel like everyone knew to speak English to me. I don't know what it is about my mannerisms, but I think a lot of folks knew that I wasn't from there. Um, but people are really nice. I think also right now too, you're seeing a lot of kindness to tourists everywhere because there's not much tourism. Even though the places I went to in Puerto Rico weren't like the most touristy for, like where the cruise ships go or anything like that. I think everybody in Puerto Rico or an island country like that sees some sort of lift to their economy from tourism. So I think that there's a real deep appreciation for when people are there, and especially if they're being respectful. Like, I was wearing my mask everywhere I went, and trying to keep a healthy distance, but I sensed a lot of gratitude from people, my Airbnb hosts included.
and would you have any advice for anyone who wants to travel to Puerto Rico in search of an outdoor experience?
Yeah, for sure. Be prepared. There's a lot of really beautiful and dangerous hikes. There was one hike I tried to go on that, like, had a lot of words about, going with a guide and things like that. And my partner and I thought we were going to go, and it was really treacherous. And we got to a point where it was closed off, and you couldn't go without like a guide who has a lock to the gate. So I think prep. Um, Counterintuitively, sometimes wear pants because of the bugs and just sort of um, underbrush and things like that. Um, but yeah, and also bring a ton of water because it's hot. Um, so yeah, prepare, I think, is the thing. Do your research. I think there's some really friendly hikes that just about anybody could do. Um, there's also going to be a lot of hikes where you have to be really mindful of staying on the trail, and it's going to be really overgrown, and it might be very muddy, and there, you know, big spider webs, things like that. The jungle grows and is very alive. So I think just being ready for that.
Okay, well, thanks again, Doob, for joining us. Before we sign off, do you have a website or Instagram or social media you want to promote?
Yeah, I am on Instagram as Hongo Bash. That's HONGOBASH. And that's where I'm trying to collect most of my passion about mycology and mushrooms.
Okay, well, that's an episode for another time. I'll have you on, and we're going to talk about mycology because I'm sure there's people interested in that. But thanks again for coming on, and be safe and have a good day.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you like this podcast, please feel free to leave a review. If you found it helpful or useful or just entertaining, let us know. We can be contacted at Papa Bear Hikes at gmail.com. Or check us out at Papa Bear Hikes 01 on Instagram. Thanks for listening. Get outside and have a great day.